We gotta do prayer requests. I'm gonna go jog up here like a lunatic. Can anyone, Sarah? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So we gotta do a prayer request. Corey has volunteered by force to handle the control room mic, so I'm gonna just give him a heads up real fast. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I believe in you. Otherwise, I want to ask. Don't do that, Corey. All right, so let's do. So today's class is just going to be like review, open discussion type stuff. Let's start with prayer list. I got a prayer thing from Jessica. She typed it up, so I'm just going to read it. Jessica Brayshaw. Please pray for Sam and Catherine Coffer, and especially for Paul and Emily Schroeder. They're two young couples she became friends with at Auburn, and to ask for prayers for them sooner. Paul and Sam underwent surgery a few weeks ago. Paul donated a kidney to Sam because Sam has a genetic disorder with the kidney, but now I would really like to ask for the prayer. So essentially, Paul and Emily also have a second child due also in August. So we need to put them on the prayer list. Anyone else need to be added or put on the prayer list? Make sure everyone's mic's on too. I just realized I think I turned off all the mics. If
it says off, it's off.
Yeah, you got to be up all the way.
John Gallagher was here at the early service. That was an answer to prayer. And Frida was doing a lot better. Gina talked to her on the phone. She's been calling Gina, so
Okay.
that's just a big deal.
Okie dokie. Is your mic on first, Ryan? No, he's too. I mean, like the physical mic. I didn't have time to switch them all on. Yeah. Up all the way. Up all the way. Up all the way, too.
Up all the way, too.
No, 2 for Corey, off all the way for you. Yeah, that way.
Yeah.
This is hard without Evan.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah, Elizabeth's grandmother, Jean Dickerson, is in the hospital right now.
Jean Dickerson.
Keep her.
Okay.
Are they thinking she's going to be moved to rehab tomorrow, or do we know? We don't know. Okay.
Let me see. Any other updates? Let me see. I saw the Gilmores. I forgot to ask about. I believe it was David's grandfather. Was it? Was Courtney's grandmother?
Courtney's grandmother and David's grandfather
That's.
both had some issues.
Yeah.
I remember.
I can ask them.
Yeah. Sue Rawls passed away, and so we remember Leanne Singer. That's her aunt, and that's Sandra's sister.
Okay.
And her funeral was yesterday. So.
Anyone else need to add anything to the prayer list? Take off. I'll say pray for the family of the. I don't know if y'all heard the Capital City incident. The family of the cop who passed away during the incident. Pray for them. Let me see. Stan, could you lead us in opening prayer?
Father in heaven, we're grateful for this time that we have this morning to listen to your word, understand what it is that you want us to have to do in life. Pray, Father, that we will listen to what it says, consider it our lives, light in our lives, so that we may be that light to shine in the world. Father, there have been those who have been to this morning who are sick, those who are hurting, those who are mourning. Pray, Father, that you will place a guiding hand over their lives and help us, Father, to be a comfort to them in their time of struggle. This thing we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Okie dokie. So, Today's, as I said, I just want to kind of, since it's Easter and everything, we've gone through 10 chapters, and we started this back, late August, early September. A lot has happened, and so I just want us to, because I don't think we get enough time to have like a proper discussion on things that we see in the class. So the first thing I want to kind of mention is like the time from chapter 1 to now, and the time span that it's taken. I may be wrong. I think I was listening to someone said it last week, but I feel like this is about 3 years at the time. So from 1 to 10 is a 3-year time span. But when you were reading it, it doesn't feel like it's 3 years. It feels like it's going so smooth. And that's kind of like how real life is in general as you get older. You don't realize the months are passing, and then January becomes April, and you're like, oh no, I had plans to do something in March. What happened to, I did those plans, I forgot. But I just want us to kind of reflect, because this is a 30-year span in Acts. So I just think one of the important things that people miss when they're reading this is the time that goes by, because they're looking at this, and they're looking at it as probably like a modern narrative type way, where someone's going to say in 3 years later, but it's not like that. So how do y'all think that influences people when they read through the scriptures?
Well, I was thinking, Acts 1:8. I mean, the fact, what you just kind of described, what we've gone through in 10 chapters, it's summed up in verse 8. So it's kind of like someone tells you what they're going to say, and then they say it. We just read the summary verse 8. But you will receive power. This is what Jesus told the apostles. You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, and to the end of the earth. So, what's interesting, you've got Jerusalem. I mean, and that is technically, that's chapters 2 all the way until chapters 7 and 8. And then Judea, that as well. And then Samaria, that's chapter 8, that's the moment when they're being persecuted. They go down into the regions of Samaria. So that's where they meet Simon the sorcerer, Philip, an Ethiopian eunuch. On their way, they're fleeing from Paul. And that took place in Samaria. And then the ends of the earth is chapter 10. That's referring to all other people, the Gentiles.
I think something that helps, I think what helps the people at the time when they were writing and reading the scriptures versus today is as you were mentioning, there's distance. So you, during that period, have to understand how long it takes for that trip. And so you're kind of calibrating that when you're reading the scriptures. Oh, they're going to Judea, that'd probably be, a few weeks. Get there and come back. As we saw like in chapter 2, towards the end, the people stayed and the people shared because they understood like coming to the temple for, was it Passover? I'm drawing a blank, but coming for the holiday, that was a long journey and people didn't plan ahead for their meals. And so that's just something that I think, especially in today's culture, when we're not just when we're teaching, but like when we're letting people read the Bible, I think they always disconnect that. And I think understanding the time, it's like I've said before, understanding the context is very important to the story, to the journey, because without understanding the time, it doesn't seem like a big ordeal.
Well, what do you mean?
No, go ahead.
Well, I think just verse 8 alone, Jesus is telling them this, right? So Jesus knows what we just read about over these last months. So all the way to chapter 10, when Jesus says this, he knows who Cornelius is. He knows about that. He's a part of that. He knows about what Paul is going to see in Acts chapter 9. He knows he's going to appear to him. But they don't. So they're hearing from Jesus. It's like, okay, I've been through Judea my whole life. I mean, I try to go around Samaria if I can, but I guess we'll go to Samaria. What are they thinking when they're hearing Jesus say this? They're not thinking what we just read. So they're getting, when Jesus says something, we need to have something called to our remembrance for what he's saying, because it's going to apply, it's going to have a purpose for the rest of their lives.
Anyone else? Ryan?
You mentioned 3 years.
Is it 3
I
years?
had heard previously 10 years.
10 years?
And the internet that I found, it also was closer to 10 years between the beginning of Acts and Cornelius.
Oh. See?
Because that also, the time in that period also includes all of the years Paul was in Arabia. That's in that time span. And it also said even some of the very early miracles from Peter was not immediately after Pentecost. It was a year or two, possibly.
That was a celebration of Pentecost. I don't know why I said Passover. He's dummy sometimes. He was a dummy, this guy.
No, you're
Another thing I want to reflect, because we read these, and a lot of people who also want to discredit the Bible at times and who leave the faith or who go to the denominational world, we read these texts, especially when we're younger, but you don't really read, and it kind of popped out when we were talking about it. You don't read some of the like brutality parts or like the harsh parts. And I don't mean harsh like they were wrong, but like harsh in the sense like, ooh, if I was getting the receiving end from the apostles right there and then there, I'd be very upset too. Like, so there's that kind of like that empathy part that that you don't notice when you're a kid. You're taught when you're a child, like, this is what they did and it was right. And you're like, yeah. But then you're reading, you're like, that is right, but man, I don't think I could have the courage to do that. And one of the characters, or not characters, but one of the individuals, it's Stephen. Stephen, before he gets murdered, he's over there, talking. Evan said it great about how the law, before the patriarchy was there, how they've taken the law over, they've taken tradition over the actual, like, worship of God and everything. That courage part, and then, like, the next part after, like, I wonder if when people grow older and they're studying, they're rereading this part in Acts, how do y'all think that reflects, especially with how the world and the culture is today? Because you can't really have a story like that today. It'd be frowned upon. So.
come up for what Stephen said.
Just the whole thing, like, in general, like, the ruthless part about it, in a sense, like calling them out in front of everybody, and then what happened after. And then even the beginning of 8, where they're, like, looking for Saul's approval, and they give Stephen's garments to him, like, is this good? Here's his garments. And Saul's like, okay. Just that whole part. Like, you couldn't really write, like, a modern story of that. Like, it would have to be a fantasy novel. You couldn't just have that real-world brutality, unless...
I mean, you see real-world brutality when we hear from other Christians in other places.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So maybe we get a false view that persecution doesn't happen today, and that. So when we're reading this, we're like, well, this is a great little history lesson, and it's something that only applies to them. I mean, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, I was talking to these brethren in India, and every Sunday we're reminded of what they're facing, and there was a preacher that was burned alive because he was a Christian, and they said it was the Hindus that caught him and did this. So, that's eye-opening that's happening, but you see reports of those who are in Christendom, in Muslim countries. Some they're experiencing jihad, being destroyed for their faith. So it's how would they read this? How would they read Stephen with some empathy, where we read it with, well, I just have no idea what that'd be like.
And that gives a good transition. Yeah. Is and I sent it to Richard earlier this week. I like to look at Gallup poll. I think they're kind of like the best neutral of the polls. You have some polls that are more reliable, but they've got a bias. Or the If you didn't hear, Richard made a pun. That's his shtick. That's why we hired him, for the puns. Despite the force. But they had a very interesting study, and I remember bringing this up a few years ago when I was doing a Wednesday night Bible class that was also as horrid as I teach. I'm not the best teacher. Brian was in that class. It was not the best. But I started the class off referencing Gallup and how just Christianity and religion in general has declined. And though the country, it was like, 2-3 years ago, was still majority looking at religions as mainstay of morality, I wanted to move because this past week I sent Richard a text about it, and it was the first time ever in the U.S. history that it was below 50% of a general house of worship. And so it's like what Richard said, we read even that may not have anything pertain to us today. But it is slowly looking like maybe tomorrow the way things have started to shift with the advent of technology, the ability to anonymously hide, and for people to say, literally this past week, there was a rapper, Lil Nas X, who released a video, in a sense, pole dancing on the devil. And, in a sense, like releasing a devil shoe. And so it kind of makes us look at the Acts of the Apostles and how they were handling the things, looking at how Stephen handles them, and seeing all this happen. I think looking at Acts now is kind of like the perfect time to be looking at it. And I just want to get people's thoughts. I don't know if y'all read as much in the cultural news as I have, but if y'all have seen anything that has changed within like the past 2-3 years that normally would be okay for a Christian to do, and how that applies into Acts as we've studied, because as we see at the beginning, they're kind of trying to bring the faith to everyone, and now we're seeing the growth and the stability part, and we're going to see it continue to grow. I think we're back kind of like the first part. We're trying to make it grow. So any ideas, anything that people want to bring up, or any questions?
You mentioned that now is a good time to be looking at Acts.
Mm-hmm.
Really, always is a good time to be looking at Acts, talking about how whatever's going on in the world, it's nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
Every generation is going to think how it was better back when I was young, and really the same sins have been around for thousands of years. So,
And that's a great point. I do think that sometimes we forget about the sins always repeating. It's just very shocking. I think it's the first time that we've experienced it. I guess we should say.
I think the technology makes us more aware of it now.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on. Because it's in our hands and they're 24/7 on our phones.
I think we've had, constitutional rights that, for the most part, have stopped the persecution because we've got freedom of speech. But more and more, that's being infringed on. Like you mentioned, social media and things. I trying to do these daily messages. There were times where I uploaded some, and I've had some of them came back, didn't allow me to boost them. Right, so tried to boost some of them, but it went against the whatever code was that week. You know what I mean? So that was eye-opening. It's as things digress in society, we can get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen what was the reason Stephen was stoned? He was, the whole time he's speaking to his brothers, our fathers, he says. He's putting himself in their shoes, like they are the same people.
And that's,
until he says, you killed the Messiah.
mhm. Think about that with the things that are in today with the prosperity gospels, because they claim to be Christian,
Yeah.
the premillennialists. That's Scott came during the summer and talked about the premillennialists and those who, like a good example was the Ethiopian eunuch, those who don't believe in submersion baptism or grace only in a sense. What Stephen went through, I think he's a great person to look at, is that, as Ryan said, like these things, they're just repackaged in a sense every generation. Stephen is kind of like an example for us right now to look at, in the sense of he's looking at his brothers when he's looking at as we look at the other denominations in the world who claim to be Christians or people who claim to be Christians. So has anyone during this time that we've studied the first 10 chapters of Acts, have they, with their interactions with anybody, you don't have to like give names, have they they learned something from the class from one of the teachers and brought it to an individual that they're just spoken about it, just like, hey, I learned this today in class. Did you know about that? I've done that before.
You're talking about with this class? Like,
Just in general, yeah, with this class, just anybody, if we talk to anybody about it. the reason why I bring that question is, I think many times we come to these Bible classes and we sit here and we're like, yeah, and we have our discussions, but do we leave it here or do we let it flow out? When we talk to people, and it goes back, it's a dead drum that I'm always beating on sometimes in class, but I'm very fearful that because we don't want to be put in a situation similar, I guess, a modern day Stephen, or, with some of the apostles at the beginning of Acts, having those verbal confrontations, we leave them at the door. We leave them here, we walk out, and we say, I learned something.
I don't know about you, but for the last year, see, I used to always try to just strike up conversation with people. This has stopped a lot of that when you're just out and about.
Uh-huh.
But there have been times more and more people want to, people do want to talk. I see where that's opening up, but it's kind of been challenging to even have conversations during COVID. So there's some challenges there, but I think the good thing about these studies is it's preparing us for when we have those opportunities, when they do rise
Yeah.
to the occasion. Into the
I don't mean to everyone go out here and seek out and do it immediately. Find the next person in the Publix parking lot and force it upon them. I'm just saying, if it happens, kind of like organic, like Richard's saying, when the time comes, do we, because there have been times when I've done it, when I'm talking on the phone with some of our clients doing taxes at times, but then there's other times where I'm like, I just want to get off the phone. I got 50 taxes on my desk. I don't have time for this. And it makes you think ooh, I'm thinking I don't got time to save a soul. Is that right? So it makes you feel awkward at times. What was that, John? For the people who are watching, I'm getting harassed.
No, that's a really deep thought.
Yeah. Yeah. But, and so I don't like to do this sometimes, call out people who walked in late, but I know the subs, they're pretty young, they're pretty cool, they're pretty hip. I was gonna ask, I don't know if y'all are back on campus or not, but I know y'all have the church group there, but just on campus in general, in class. How is it today? In general, I don't know if y'all been studying along with Acts with us, because I know y'all got your own congregations up there, but have there been situations like that? I just want to kind of get it, because when I was on campus, it was like a 50-50 at times. There were times where the classroom didn't really care. There were times where I had to hide my head, oh, can't really say it today. And other times, it was an open okay, and you had one person that was from China in the back corner. You're like, is it okay to say it around them? And they didn't understand, so that was just a fun little fact. But just how's y'all's experience today on a campus that's
Yeah, I mean, like Richard said, like with the mask and everything, it is kind of difficult just to go up and talk to people. I know, like with my classes at least, I have a couple in person, and there's not really like a lot of communication going on with everybody. It's just kind of going to class and listening to the professor lecture and things like that. But there definitely is still the opportunity to just like reach out and everything. But I would say it is limited with the whole masks and everything like that.
I found that online has been the better option because there's not the this really does create issues. Depends on where the person is, in their thinking. Sometimes you can't hear what the person's saying. Very hard to joke and just be jovial with people when you have this because there's no reading of facial cues and things like that. So it's been you have to change your approach to how, so I find that online has been a great place to get in conversation with people. And sometimes it's like, hey, this is really good. How about a private message? Would you be able to, private message? And that's where, I've been able to do private messages with folks because sometimes that public forum, it's like mob. It's trying to teach the mob as Paul is being stoned in Lystra. The same group tried to worship him, turned around and stoned him at the changing of something that was said by a few. Social media has become that, but there are still opportunities to say, hey, would you like to talk about this further? And I've used personal like that. So that's a way to cut through some of that. So really online has been a great blessing there.
And I think online, like the online teaching, it is kind of like at times, and I don't want to like say it in the wrong way. I just thought about it, but like the Holy Spirit came down, gave the apostles tongues, gave them the ability to do miracles. We can't do miracles today, but we have the ability now to reach out to people, and we have the ability. There are some times there's some options to put subtitles in different languages, so like in different tongues in a sense to reach out. Technology, so it's good. It's good and bad because of I would say, I don't like to say the competing content, like rap videos sometimes or other things like that. You're just like, how do we get this message out better? But another thing, and this is just a general question, in the first 10 chapters, has there been, I think I've already asked it, but I just want to kind of re-emphasize it again. Has there been something that you've never noticed within these chapters about a certain event until the discussions we've had? It's a genuine, like, curiosity on my behalf. Because for me, like I've mentioned Steve, and I've mentioned, just the transition with Paul, how abrupt that was, how even the first 2 chapters, when you're looking at it, it's just Christ is back just for that brief moment, and he gives them their mission, and they go off. In the 2nd chapter, Peter, the power that's going on in that right there in his first sermon. There's just a lot of things that I don't think, until we discuss it, that it's not brought up. So, open floor to everyone.
I mean, I think one thing you're talking about from these chapters 1 through 10, I think one of the greatest takeaways when you just kind of helicopter away from it and just look at the the big picture, none of us would want to be persecuted. Stephen, I'm sure, didn't want to be stoned to death. But as a result, the very one that, for instance, Paul, the very one that approved of his execution went on to take the gospel message to the rest of the known world. So what does this help me see in relation to persecution? God used it for his glory. If it wasn't for the persecution, Simon the sorcerer never would have obeyed. If it wasn't for the persecution, the Ethiopian eunuch wouldn't have met Philip, and the gospel wouldn't have been taken to Ethiopia. That's going to continue to grow as we go on. But
Yeah.
Cornelius would never have heard the gospel from Peter. And God was able to use negative to bring about positive. So, yeah, we talked about how we don't like this. But think about all the positives God's been able to use from this. Because really the online capability and Zoom, every Sunday we have a Bible study with people in India. Bill Reed and myself. And because of time change, it's now like we're done at 10:30 tonight, every Sunday night. But if we didn't have COVID, I didn't know what Zoom was before COVID.
I don't think no one knew what Zoom was before COVID.
Right. So it's really become a great opportunity for the gospel to be proclaimed, and also for people who are really busy to become engaged in something in their own time or in the comfort of their home. I think being able to do that it's just a big deal. Bill and I have both been talking. He's been teaching, and he said this has been such a blessing for him during this crazy time.
I want to harp on two things and then open it back up to everybody. But the two themes that we're seeing in the first 10 chapters are very important just in general. The theme is that it's an easy theme. There are two bold ones I'm looking at. It's like persecution and I forgot the second one. What were we saying? Persecution and when your brain half works in the morning because you don't have enough chat.
Persecution, but then also providence.
Providence. It'll come to me. Man, you can tell that I was prepared today. Now, I'll come to me, but opening back up to the floor, does anyone have anything that when they've reviewed these chapters or looking back on these chapters or rest of our discussion they want to bring up that they've, not thought much on? Right.
Going along with that is, I think Stan was the teacher when Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, Philip had to start his journey before the eunuch even left Jerusalem because he was behind Jerusalem. So he said, go meet this guy, and the guy he was meeting had been left. It was the Spirit and providence provided that led him to start his journey before the other guy even started his. So that was something I had not ever really thought about.
Another thing too that we're kind of I couldn't name the chapters, but I did in the introduction part of the class, and I've seen people mention different parts in the discussion, but these books and the epistles, they're not two separate things. They're one and the same in a sense. They're written around the same period because they're written by the same author. And so I think as we're reading Acts more and more, we're starting to get a better understanding individually of each epistle written by Paul, some by Peter, because we're understanding their thoughts during that time period. When they're we're reading not Romans yet, but Romans 11 was brought up the other day. When we keep continuing in, we're going to understand more why that is so important, because we're actually going to see probably the scenery of why that's taken place and what brought Paul, not just the, Holy Spirit, but the events that surrounded him to want to write about it with the Holy Spirit.
Well, I think too, the reason for the book of Acts, we find in Luke 1, in verse 1, where he's writing Theophilus, and he's saying, I'm writing these things to you so that you might be more certain of the things that you've been taught. I think we all need to be more certain of the things we've been taught. The more we study, the more we're going to see, hey, this brings about certainty. Well, I know I need that every day, because I can look at how they navigated these very challenging situations. It helps me to see how I navigated as well, and not lose my faith in the process. And it's I know we go back to this. Well, I think persecution is the reason all these things took place. Persecution could be defined as something happening to you don't intend. So none of us have intended to experience life this past year the way we've intended. I mean, we set out with this, I mean, just the theme alone was reach out during a time where you literally couldn't touch anyone. Hindsight's 2020, you know, I didn't mean that to be a
That's a
pun,
good-
but
Yeah.
I did not mean that to be a pun. But you know, if we had have known, I probably would have chosen that to be the theme. But we've had to figure out ways to reach out that we couldn't, you know, that we didn't before. And it was so easy to just go, well, it's just kind of impossible, you know, for this to happen. But I think if you look at all this, Philip, he's minding his own business, as Ryan mentioned, and it was the Spirit who led him to start his journey before the Ethiopian eunuch ever did. You know, God's going to give us opportunities as we're going through life, and we just got to be ready for them as they come, just as the same way they were.
Another thing that comes out is the word bold is used a number of times. It's just so far back. And you think, well, why bold? The boldness means you're the David in the story of David and Goliath. You know, you're the one that's fighting uphill. It seems like you're the one who's out of your comfort zone, if you will. You know, going that extra step, pushing forward, when everything seems to be behind you. Like, for instance, we just said Stephen, when he was talking with the Sanhedrin. I mean, he was outnumbered by far in that room, I'm sure. And many other examples that talk about when Barnabas went before the apostles and said, this guy, Saul, he's actually with us as opposed to against us. It took them a long time to say, hey, I'm behind this guy. You know, I mean, after what he had been doing for 3 or 4 years, you know? I mean, he was persecuting. But yet you have to get out of that comfort zone and be who you are. God says, I want you to do something. And you don't always understand, like Ananias, he didn't understand why he wanted to, you know, go talk to this guy, but God says, I want you to do it.
I think I'm going to end it here. We're at 10:07,
Well,
but because I kind of want to get some announcements out real fast. So before we have our closing prayer, May 22nd, we're going to have the Nakalulu Falls again. We're going to try to make that a annual thing for our group because that's when a lot of the college kids are back. We have 2 events that we put in the budget we're planning. We're really thinking about not just, we were thinking about the college kids and the young adults, things that they both like. So we got one of the things coming up in June also. So the Nakalulu Falls is going to be May 22nd. I believe that's the second to last Saturday. Everyone should be home by then. We don't know if we're going to do a summer series yet. We got to wait and see how that goes. Got to ask Alex about that. In June, I think it's the second Saturday or Friday in June, we're going to go up to Diane, Tennessee. They have 2 times during the year, they have a giant singing event. So they thought that'd be good for both groups. And in July, we're still planning it out, but we want to make a trip. We got to look at the dates to go to Georgia. They have a really good Bible museum. So we've also budgeted that into this year. So we're going to start making announcements for it soon, but I kind of want to get those out since we missed spring break last year for the Dykes and some others. I was like, we should have made those announcements. So we need to start making them now, but we got those 3 big things planned. So if you're all interested, just let us know. And Diane, we're going to probably start seeing if maybe we need a carpool, and same thing for the Georgia Bible Museum. But we're going to start getting those things planned since summer's coming. Guys, as I said at the beginning, time flies and you don't realize it. 3 to 10 years has already gone by in this book. So this is the book. We need to hurry up and get things ready. So with that, I'll ask Jack, since I keep calling him out, can you lead us in a closing prayer?
Father in heaven, thank you for just giving us this time to be able to have Bible class and study from your word and try to take from your word what we need to. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be able to come together and do it in person. And just please be with us as we continue to go out. Help us to stay safe, but help us to also really push to spread your word even through just this difficult time. And just thank you so much for everything that you do in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hopefully David will be here next